Long before the neon lights of New Vegas flickered to life, before the courier walked the desert roads, before the flags of war were raised over Hoover Dam, the Mojave was quiet. The Great War had scorched the world in a single day, and the deserts around what was once Nevada became a vast ocean of dust and silence. The bombs did not fall evenly. Some cities were erased in seconds, while others endured, buried beneath the sand, half broken but alive. Las Vegas was one of the survivors. Its survival was not an accident. It was a calculation. Robert House, the man who would one day call himself Mr. House, had seen the end coming long before the sirens began. A genius born into wealth, House was the founder of Robco Industries, one of the most powerful technology companies of the pre-war world. He understood numbers the way others understood faith. Through probability, he predicted the unthinkable, that a global nuclear exchange was inevitable, and that the future of civilization would depend on preparation, not prevention. Using his fortune, House quietly secured control of the Las Vegas defense grid, the city's infrastructure, and the resources to shield it from the apocalypse. When the bombs fell, House's plan worked. Automated defense systems shot down most incoming missiles, and the city's core was spared. Thousands died, but the Strip, the heart of Las Vegas, remained standing. Underground, House himself entered a stasis chamber connected to a network of machines that would keep his body preserved for centuries. His goal was simple: survive the end of the world long enough to rebuild it. While House slept, the rest of Nevada changed. The radiation that swept across the Mojave was uneven, pockets of pure ruin mixed with zones of strange fertility. Plants adapted, insects grew larger. Mutants wandered through the ruins. And scattered across the land were the survivors, wanderers, vault dwellers, and tribes who no longer remembered what the old world had been. To them, the city in the distance, its towers still visible through the dust, became legend. They called it the Shining Corpse, the city that refused to die. Far from the ruins of the Strip, another kind of survival was taking place. In the western states, the descendants of soldiers, engineers, and civilians began to form something resembling order. The vaults that had opened in California gave rise to new settlements. Towns like Shady Sands grew into cities. From these roots came the new California Republic, the NCR, a fledgling government built on democracy, law, and the desperate hope that civilization could be reborn. It began as a handful of settlements working together for safety. Within a few generations, it became an empire. The NCR was ambitious. It expanded outward, taking territory, building roads, and unearthing technologies from the past. Its people carried rifles, not spears. They spoke of votes, not tribes. But their ideals came with hunger, the kind that governments cannot feed. Expansion required resources, and resources were scarce. Water, electricity, and food became reasons for conquest. The Republic called its wars annexations. But to those living on the edges, it felt no different from invasion. Still, the NCR's banner, the double-headed bear, spread across the west, and eventually, its scouts reached the Mojave. At first, they found little of interest. The desert was harsh, its people scattered. Raiders, scavengers, and tribals dominated the land. But beyond the mountains, the NCR discovered something remarkable: the Hoover Dam. Built centuries before the Great War, the dam was still standing, immense, silent, and capable of supplying power to thousands of homes if restored. To the Republic, Hoover Dam represented the future. To control it would be to control the heart of the desert. But they were not the only ones who wanted it. East of the Mojave, across the broken lands of Arizona and New Mexico, another power had risen, one older in spirit, if not in years. It called itself Caesar's Legion, and its creator, a man named Edward Sallow, had built it not through democracy, but through domination. A former member of the Followers of the Apocalypse, Sallow had once been an idealist, but during his travels, he discovered that fear and faith were faster tools than reason. Using the structure of ancient Rome as his model, he forged dozens of tribes into one army through conquest. He became Caesar, ruler of the legion, emperor of the wasteland. His soldiers marched under red banners, his camps were built in order, and his words became law. To the NCR, he was a barbarian. To his followers, he was a god. When Caesar's scouts reached the Colorado River, they saw the same prize the NCR had seen, Hoover Dam. And thus began the silent buildup to one of the most important battles in the history of the post-war world. The NCR moved westward, building camps and outposts. The Legion gathered its forces on the eastern banks. Between them lay the ruins of New Vegas, neutral, quiet, and waiting. But New Vegas was not dead. Within the buried heart of the city, Mr. House awoke. His systems, long dormant, came online one by one. He watched the new world through the eyes of his Securitrons, robotic enforcers that still patrolled the Strip. He saw the NCR, proud and bureaucratic. He saw the Legion, ruthless and primitive. And he saw the chance to fulfill his original goal, rebuild civilization, but on his terms. To the people of the Mojave, House's awakening was a miracle. Through his Securitrons, he restored power to the Strip, cleaned the streets, and reopened the casinos. He gathered the tribes who lived nearby and offered them a choice: join him or be left outside his walls. Most joined, forming the three great casino families: the Chairman, the Omertas, and the White Glove Society. Each was given a home, a name, and rules to follow. In return, they swore loyalty to the city's unseen ruler. House turned the ruins of Las Vegas into New Vegas, a glittering oasis in a desert of ash. By the time the NCR arrived, New Vegas was already alive again. House welcomed their diplomats, offered trade, and proposed neutrality. But both sides knew the peace was temporary. The NCR wanted the dam, the Legion wanted conquest, and House wanted independence. The Mojave became the center of a fragile triangle, its future hanging on the choices of those who would soon arrive: mercenaries, traders, soldiers, and one courier whose package would change everything. That courier carried a single platinum chip, a piece of technology designed by House before the Great War, lost for centuries, and rediscovered in the most unlikely of ways. It was more than a coin. It was the key to upgrading the entire Securitron army beneath the Strip, giving House the power to control the Mojave without war. But fate, as always, had other plans. The courier was intercepted, shot, buried, and yet, somehow, survived. Their journey, from death to destiny, would become the defining story of New Vegas, a story that would decide the fate of every soul in the desert. The Mojave, once a graveyard, was alive again. Three powers stood on its soil, one of democracy, one of empire, and one of control. And between them walked a single person, carrying a bullet scar and a choice that would echo across the centuries. The wasteland had waited long enough for its next chapter. The story of New Vegas had begun. The Mojave Desert has always been a place of conflict, long before the bombs fell. It was once the crossing point between nations, a stretch of endless sun and dust that separated everything and everyone. But after the Great War, the Mojave became something new, a stage for the last echoes of civilization to fight over the bones of the old world. The heart of that stage was Hoover Dam, and it would become the symbol of power for every faction that laid eyes upon it. When the scouts of the New California Republic first discovered Hoover Dam, they could hardly believe it had survived. The concrete structure, built centuries before, still towered between the cliffs of the Colorado River. Though its turbines were silent and its machinery rusted, the dam remained intact, a monument to human persistence. Engineers sent by the NCR studied its systems, calculated its potential, and realized that if they could restore its function, they would hold enough energy to power entire cities across the West. For a republic built on progress, it was too valuable to ignore. The NCR moved quickly. They dispatched troops, caravans, and settlers, securing the western side of the Mojave. Camp McCarran became their military hub, and outposts sprang up along the old highways. The Republic promised the people of the Mojave order and prosperity, citizenship, security, and the return of civilization. But their presence brought taxes, laws, and bureaucracy, things that did not sit well with those who had survived on freedom and scarcity. To the NCR, the Mojave was a frontier. To the locals, it was home. The seeds of resentment were planted long before the first battle began. On the other side of the Colorado River, a very different kind of order was taking shape. Caesar's legion, forged in fire and fear, was spreading like wildfire through the east. Edward Sallow, now Caesar, had united more than 80 tribes under his banner. He had done so not with diplomacy, but with absolute force. Those who refused to join were crucified or enslaved. Those who accepted became part of his machine, warriors trained to obey without hesitation. The legion was not merely an army, it was a civilization built on conquest. To Caesar, the ruins of the old world were a disease. The pre-war governments had fallen because they had become soft, indulgent, and dependent on technology. His legion, stripped of weakness, would be reborn through brutality. In his philosophy, pain was not punishment, it was purification. The weak would be burned away, and only strength would remain. His followers believed him without question, and so his empire grew, stretching from the Grand Canyon to the edge of the Mojave. By the time his scouts reached the Colorado River, his forces numbered in the tens of thousands. When the Legion first laid eyes on Hoover Dam, they saw more than an engineering marvel. They saw a symbol, a relic of the very world Caesar intended to destroy. To take it would be to prove the supremacy of his vision. The NCR saw progress. Caesar saw destiny. The dam became a mirror, reflecting both their ambitions, and between those reflections, war began to stir. The NCR was confident at first. Their soldiers were trained, their weapons mass-produced, and their numbers steady. But they were fighting an enemy that did not fear death. The Legion's soldiers, conditioned through years of indoctrination, charged into battle with fanatical devotion. They carried machetes and spears, relics of ancient warfare, but they wielded them with terrifying precision. Entire NCR patrols vanished into the desert without a trace, their camps found days later decorated with the Legion's crimson banners. The Republic, built on rules and lines, struggled against chaos given form. The first battle of Hoover Dam came like a storm. The NCR, under the command of General Lee Oliver, fortified the western side of the dam with artillery, machine guns, and snipers. The Legion, led by Caesar's second-in-command, the legendary legate Laenius, marched from the east in massive formation. Laenius was not just a commander, he was a myth, a man who had survived impalement, who wore armor made from the bones of his enemies, who spoke little and killed often. To his soldiers, he was the embodiment of the Legion's strength. To the NCR, he was death approaching on two legs. When the battle began, the desert erupted with fire. The Legion charged headlong into the dam's defenses, their war drums echoing through the canyons. NCR Rangers picked them off from a distance, but for every legionnaire that fell, two more advanced. The Colorado River ran red for days. Civilians fled the nearby settlements, and smoke from the dam could be seen for miles. It was not strategy that decided the first battle, it was endurance. In the end, the NCR held the dam, but at a staggering cost. Thousands of soldiers were lost. The Legion's assault was broken not through superior tactics, but through attrition. Caesar had underestimated the Republic's artillery and the ferocity of its rangers. When the dust settled, the NCR's flag still flew over Hoover Dam. The Legion retreated to regroup across the river, but they were not defeated, merely delayed. The Mojave had not seen peace, only a pause. The first battle of Hoover Dam changed the balance of power in the desert. The NCR claimed victory, but it was hollow. Their forces were stretched thin, their supply lines fragile, and their morale fading. The Republic declared the Mojave a protectorate, establishing New Vegas as a trade hub under their supervision. But their grip was loose. They controlled the roads, not the hearts of the people. The locals saw the NCR as another empire, just one wearing cleaner uniforms. For Caesar, the defeat was not a loss, but a lesson. He withdrew his forces and began rebuilding the Legion stronger than before. He turned his camps into fortresses, his soldiers into symbols of fear. He studied the NCR's tactics, their weaknesses, their over-reliance on supply chains and bureaucracy, and when he was ready, he promised his followers a second battle, one that would not end until the Bear's banner was torn down and burned. In the years that followed, tensions settled over the Mojave like dust. Between the NCR's occupation and the Legion's looming threat, the people learned to survive in the cracks. Towns like Novak, Goodsprings, and Primm lived under constant uncertainty, too small to matter, too stubborn to vanish. The Strip, under the watchful eye of Mr. House, remained neutral, its bright lights masking the quiet fear beneath. The Mojave became a chessboard of hidden moves, waiting for the next hand to play. And then, one day, a courier carrying a small platinum chip vanished along a desert road. The chip was meant for New Vegas, but it never arrived. Word spread quietly that the courier had been shot and buried near a small settlement called Goodsprings. No one expected them to live. No one expected the desert to remember. But the Mojave has always had a strange sense of humor. From the dust rose a survivor with no name, no past, and a destiny written in the circuitry of that lost coin. The balance of power was about to shift again. The desert does not forget. It buries its stories in sand and stone, then waits patiently for someone to dig them up again. When the courier awoke in a small house in Goodsprings, bandaged and broken but breathing, the Mojave itself seemed to pause. They should have been dead. A bullet through the head, a shallow grave, and silence. That was how most stories ended in the wasteland, but this one refused to. The courier's survival was an accident only on the surface. Beneath it, it felt like something deliberate, as though the desert had chosen not to let them go. Doc Mitchell, a retired physician and former vault doctor, was the one who found them. He patched them up, gave them water, and watched as they slowly remembered how to walk, how to speak, how to live again. The courier could recall little of who they were, only that they had been carrying a delivery, a small, silver disc known as the Platinum Chip. It had been meant for New Vegas, but along the way, someone had decided to intercept it. A man in a checkered suit and a smile like a blade had taken the package, shot them in the head, and left them for dead. The man's name was Benny, and though he did not know it yet, that single act would change the Mojave forever. When the courier left Goodsprings, the world beyond was already teetering. The new California Republic held the West with crumbling confidence. Caesar's legion loomed from the east like a shadow stretching toward the sun, and in the center of it all, the city of New Vegas shone like a jewel in a desert crown, untouched by time, guarded by machines, and ruled by a ghost who never slept. Mr. House had returned to his city, and with him came the illusion of civilization. Under House's watchful eye, the Strip became alive again. The lights never dimmed, powered by ancient generators, restored by his robotic engineers. The casinos opened their doors to travelers, offering a taste of the old world's luxury: food, drink, and chance. The three families that ran the Strip, the chairman at the Tops, the Omertas at Gomorrah, and the White Glove Society at the Ultra Luxe, each played their part in maintaining order. They were not allies nor enemies, but pieces of House's design. He had shaped them into balance, ensuring that none grew strong enough to threaten his control. For over 200 years, he had dreamed of a civilization reborn from the ashes, and now that dream was within reach. But even perfection has cracks. House's influence ended where his Securitron's patrol routes did. Beyond the neon glow, the Mojave was still a wilderness. Towns struggled, raiders preyed on travelers. NCR patrols fought to maintain authority, but their numbers thinned with each passing month. The Legion tested the Republic's defenses constantly, raiding outposts and capturing slaves to fuel their endless expansion. The Mojave was not peace. It was a pause. And somewhere between those borders walked the courier, following the trail of the man who had buried them. The search led from settlement to settlement, from Goodsprings to Primm, from Novak to Boulder City. Along the way, the courier began to hear whispers. People spoke of the Strip's ruler, a mysterious figure who never aged, who ruled through machines, and who offered contracts to those who could find a missing package. They also spoke of Benny, the man in the checkered suit, seen gambling in New Vegas as if nothing had happened. The Mojave's stories always looped back to the Strip, to the light in the darkness that drew both hope and trouble like moths. When the courier finally reached New Vegas, the city was everything and nothing they expected. The Strip was alive, music, laughter, and light spilling into the night. But behind that beauty was precision. Every movement of the Securitrons was calculated. Every word spoken by the casino hosts was rehearsed. It was a city of artifice, built by design, not desire. House's fingerprints were everywhere, in the spotless streets, the glowing signs, the silence that followed disorder. Civilization had been reborn, but it no longer needed people to sustain it. Machines handled the work. The living were there only to fill the illusion. Beneath the surface, deep within the Lucky 38 casino, Mr. House watched. His body, preserved in a life support chamber for centuries, was frail, a skeleton wrapped in wires. But his mind, stored across countless computers, was still sharp, still calculating. When he finally spoke to the courier through the casino's monitors, his tone was not cruel or kind, it was logical. He explained what the Platinum Chip truly was: a pre-war key designed to upgrade every Securitron under his command. With it, he could activate a vast army hidden beneath the Strip, securing the Mojave against any outside threat. Neither the NCR nor the Legion would be able to challenge him. Humanity, under his guidance, could finally evolve. House's plan was ambitious. A new world ruled not by emotion or politics, but by reason. A civilization rebuilt under a single, immortal mind. To many, it would sound tyrannical. To House, it was mercy. His rule would not bring oppression, but stability. Humanity's mistake, he once said, was believing that perfection required freedom. He saw himself not as a conqueror, but as a caretaker. The courier, listening to his proposal, became the pivot upon which the Mojave would turn. Outside the Strip, the NCR's grip continued to weaken. The Republic had claimed victory at Hoover Dam years before, but the cost of maintaining it had nearly bankrupted them. Their soldiers were underpaid, their rations scarce, and their morale fractured. The Mojave was a desert of ghosts, and they were bleeding to hold it. Still, they refused to leave. To abandon Hoover Dam would be to admit defeat. And so, they stayed, fighting not for territory anymore, but for pride. Across the river, Caesar's legion prepared for another war. The tribes under his rule had multiplied, trained by his generals and molded by his will. Fortification Hill, an ancient pre-war military base, became his capital. There, in the shadow of broken towers, Caesar ruled like a living myth. His people believed him chosen by destiny, and in his own way, he did too. To him, Hoover Dam was more than a structure. It was prophecy, a symbol that the old world would fall and his new empire would rise. He would march his armies west again, and this time he would not stop. And so the Mojave stood on the edge once more, just as it had years before the first battle. But this time, there was a fourth force moving among them, one not bound by flag or philosophy. The courier, guided only by fragments of memory and the will to survive, began to unravel the threads connecting House, the NCR, and the Legion. Every side wanted the platinum chip. Every side wanted control. But the courier had something none of them expected: freedom. No government, no army, no history, just a choice. That choice was the quiet heartbeat of the Mojave. The NCR believed in order. The Legion believed in strength. House believed in control. But the courier represented the one thing the wasteland had always forgotten: agency. A single person, unbound, could shift the fate of nations. The desert, silent and eternal, waited to see which path they would choose. Somewhere deep below the Lucky 38, machines waited too. Hundreds of Securitrons, dormant for centuries, humming softly in the dark, ready to wake at a single command. Above them, the lights of New Vegas shimmered endlessly, as if pretending the night no longer mattered. And across the river, an army of red banners gathered beneath the moon. The world had ended once already. It was ready to begin again. New Vegas has always been a city of masks. Every gambler who walks its streets wears one, some made of charm, others of desperation. Beneath the neon lights, every smile hides a secret, every deal a trap. Benny, with his checkered suit and smooth words, was the city's perfect son, a man who understood that survival in Vegas wasn't about strength or loyalty, it was about style. When he took the platinum chip from the courier and shot them in the head, it wasn't personal, it was business. But in the Mojave, business and fate have always been the same thing. Benny had been one of Mr. House's chosen. As the leader of the chairman, he ruled the Tops Casino, one of the three great houses of the Strip. His job was simple: keep the money flowing, the guests happy, and the order intact. For a while, he played his part perfectly, but ambition, like radiation, seeps into everything. Benny began to believe that he could be more than a casino boss. He saw the platinum chip as a key to independence, a chance to wrest control of New Vegas from its mechanical overlord. House, to him, was old world decay. He was the future. The plan was simple: steal the chip, upgrade the Securitron army himself, and take the throne. But in the wasteland, nothing stays simple for long. The courier's survival disrupted everything. Suddenly, the man Benny thought he'd buried became a ghost haunting his every step. Rumors spread through the strip like wildfire. "The dead courier walks," people whispered, half in fear, half in awe. Even the hardened gamblers at the tops began to glance over their shoulders. Benny could still smile, still joke, still bluff, but his luck was fading, and he knew it. The Mojave has never been kind to those who think they can outplay destiny. While Benny tried to hold his world together with charm and whiskey, far across the Colorado River, Caesar was shaping his empire into something mythic. To his followers, he was not just a ruler, he was divinity made flesh. His camps stretched for miles, tents arranged in perfect formation, banners fluttering red against the desert wind. Every soldier, every slave, every priest in the legion followed his word as law. To disobey was to die, and to die for him was to live forever in legend. Caesar's philosophy had deepened into religion. He spoke not only of conquest but of destiny, that the old world had burned so that his legion could be born pure. He told his people that democracy had failed because it allowed weakness to flourish. Only through absolute power, through the will of a single ruler, could humanity be reborn. To those who lived under his rule, he was terrifying. To those who worshipped him, he was salvation. The Mojave was divided by belief, not geography, but Caesar, for all his strength, was not invincible. Behind his mask of godhood, his body was failing. A tumor had begun to grow within his brain, small at first, then unbearable. His followers did not know. To reveal weakness would have shattered the illusion that sustained the legion. So he hid his pain behind silence, allowing only his most trusted physician to treat him. The irony was bitter. The man who had built an empire on the worship of strength was dying by his own biology. His empire, built on blood, would not survive without him. The courier's journey through the Mojave brought them face to face with both these men, the charming liar and the dying god, each offering power wrapped in persuasion. When the courier finally confronted Benny inside the Tops Casino, the air itself seemed to still. The walls hummed with tension, the slot machines ringing like distant drums. Benny smiled. Of course. He always smiled. "Hey, kid," he said, "you're making me wish I'd put two in your head." But the charm couldn't mask the fear. For the first time, he wasn't holding the cards. What happened next depended on the courier's will. In some stories, Benny begged for his life. In others, he laughed until the end. But no matter how the story ends, the meaning is the same. Vegas has no mercy. The city gives and takes in equal measure. Benny's dream of becoming king of New Vegas died in the same place it was born, beneath the bright lights of the Strip, surrounded by luxury he could never truly own. He had tried to outplay a ghost and a god, and the desert never forgives arrogance. After Benny's fall, the platinum chip returned to its rightful hands, but whose hands those were depended on choice. If the courier gave it to Mr. House, the old magnate's dream of control drew closer to completion. His army of Securitrons, upgraded through the chip's hidden code, became stronger, faster, deadlier. The streets of New Vegas thrummed with the sound of servos and electricity. For the first time in 2 centuries, Mr. House had his empire, but even then, he knew that his greatest variable was not the NCR, nor the Legion. It was the person standing in front of him. He needed the courier's trust, but trust is a currency rarer than caps in the Mojave. If the courier refused him, if they chose to walk their own path, House's calculations began to unravel. He had planned for everything: war, decay, entropy, but not defiance. In every possible future he had simulated, humanity's survival depended on obedience. The courier, like the wasteland itself, refused to obey. It was not chaos that threatened House. It was independence. The same force that had driven him to preserve civilization now stood against him in human form. Meanwhile, Caesar watched from across the river, amused. He saw the courier not as a threat, but as a curiosity. He sent messengers across the Mojave, inviting them to his camp. When the courier arrived, they found not a barbarian horde, but an empire that mirrored ancient Rome in both glory and cruelty. Slaves tended to fires, centurions sharpened blades, priests quoted Latin texts no one else understood, and at the center, upon a throne of salvaged metal and stone, sat Caesar himself. He welcomed the courier not as an enemy, but as an equal, or at least as something close. His voice was calm, measured, almost kind. He spoke of fate, of power, of humanity's need for direction. "The wasteland is chaos," he said, "and I am its order." He saw the courier's defiance as proof of worth, a sign that destiny had chosen them. In another life, perhaps, he would have made them his successor. In the background, unseen by both ruler and rebel, the true Mojave watched quietly. The tribes, the traders, the wanderers, all caught between forces far larger than themselves, continued to live, barter, and dream. The wars of men in uniforms and armor meant little to those who measured life by water and sunlight. They had learned the oldest lesson of the wasteland: no matter who wins, the desert always remains. The courier, standing between empire and machine, began to understand this too. The choices ahead would not just shape New Vegas. They would define what kind of future humanity deserved: freedom or order, faith or control, mercy or dominance. Every side offered salvation wrapped in compromise. But in the quiet hours, when the wind swept through the canyons and the lights of the strip flickered in the distance, one truth remained. The Mojave was not waiting to be ruled, it was waiting to be understood. The Mojave is quiet in ways that cities never are. At night, the wind carries the soft hiss of sand against rusted metal, the distant hum of broken power lines, and sometimes, if you listen closely, the whisper of a radio still looping a message no one is left to hear. Between the wars and the ruins, life continues. Merchants lighting campfires beside cracked highways, NCR soldiers polishing rifles that jam more often than they fire, Legion scouts watching silently from across the river. The wasteland is breathing in, waiting. Years have passed since the first battle for Hoover Dam, and both sides bear the scars. The new California Republic controls the western half of the Mojave, but its reach is stretched thin. Its soldiers are tired, its commanders weary. General Lee Oliver commands the Mojave Campaign from Camp McCarran, supported by Chief Hanlon and the Rangers, men and women who have seen more desert than daylight. They still believe in the Republic's dream, law, order, democracy, but belief alone cannot fill canteens or repair broken rifles. Supply lines from California take weeks to cross the mountains. Every caravan that arrives brings fewer resources and more bad news. The people back west are losing patience. The Republic's frontier has become its burden. The NCR is fighting a war it can no longer afford. For every town it pacifies, two more fall into chaos. Corruption spreads through its ranks, like radiation. Officers take bribes to look the other way. Soldiers desert for caps, and politicians in shady sands grow fat off promises they never intend to keep. The double-headed bear on the Republic's flag still looks fierce, but the animal itself is starving. Yet the NCR stays in the Mojave, because to leave would mean admitting weakness. Hoover Dam is more than a power source. It is pride, the last symbol of civilization holding against the wild. Across the Colorado River, Caesar's legion waits in silence. Their camps burn with torchlight at night, a constellation of fire scattered across the desert. For years, they have been rebuilding, training, expanding. Every defeat is studied, every weakness purged. The Legion is stronger now, more disciplined, more numerous, more fanatical. Caesar's generals, the centurions, and Decanii drill their soldiers until obedience replaces thought. Their armor is made from scavenged metal, their weapons forged from scrap, but their faith is unbreakable. To the Legion, the coming war is not a campaign, it is prophecy. Yet within Caesar himself, there is rot. The tumor growing in his brain has worsened. The pain comes in waves now, sharp, searing, divine. His followers believe the headaches are visions, signs from Mars, the god of war. Caesar does not correct them. He lets them see him as a prophet, even as the disease eats through his strength. In the quiet of his tent, he wonders if the tumor is punishment for hubris or proof of purpose. The line between the two has always been thin. Still, he continues his rituals, his speeches, his endless planning. To show weakness would be to unravel the world he built. He entrusts more to his second in command, Legate Laenius, the monster of the East, the butcher whose name alone can silence a campfire conversation. Laenius does not speak of ideology or destiny. He speaks of conquest. To him, the Legion is not philosophy, it is survival perfected. If Caesar were to fall, Laenius would not hesitate to finish the war in blood. The legate's presence ensures that even if the god dies, the empire endures. Fear, Caesar knows, will outlive faith. Between these two powers lies the fragile heart of the Mojave, New Vegas. The strip's lights never dim, not even as war looms closer. Mr. House continues to monitor every frequency, every caravan route, every movement of soldiers near the dam. His Securitrons patrol the streets with polite menace, their cheerful voices a mask for lethality. He knows that both the NCR and the Legion will soon clash again, and that in the chaos, opportunity will arise. His goal remains unchanged: control. To him, the upcoming war is not a tragedy, but a variable, one that can be exploited to secure New Vegas's independence forever. The courier moves quietly through this brewing storm, passing through camps and casinos, through NCR bureaucracy and Legion ritual. To each side, they are a curiosity, a wanderer with no flag, a question with no answer. But every conversation, every choice, tilts the Mojave slightly. The courier might deliver water to NCR camps, earning their trust, or sabotage supply lines, weakening their morale. They might listen to Caesar's sermons beneath the crimson banners, or secretly plant seeds of rebellion among his slaves. Each small act becomes part of a mosaic too vast for any one faction to see. The Mojave has learned that destiny is not decided by armies, but by those who walk between them. At Camp McCarran, Colonel Shu writes reports no one will read, detailing skirmishes along the highway and the slow decay of discipline. At Hoover Dam, engineers work tirelessly to keep the turbines running, their hands stained with oil and hope. The NCR engineers know the dam better than anyone alive, yet even they admit the structure feels cursed, as if it remembers the blood that soaked its walls during the first battle. They whisper that the dam itself is tired, ready to break, though no one dares to say it aloud. Meanwhile, on the other side of the river, Caesar's priests carve his words into stone tablets salvaged from the ruins. They chant at dawn, their voices echoing through the canyons, a low rumble that reaches even the NCR outposts miles away. Soldiers on both sides pretend not to listen, but they hear it all the same, the rhythm of inevitability. The war is coming again, and this time it will not end with retreat. Both the bear and the bull are wounded, but neither will yield. In the Mojave, pride weighs more than blood. Mr. House, analyzing every probability, knows this as well. Through his network of satellites and sensors, he calculates countless outcomes. In most of them, the NCR wins, but only barely. In others, the Legion triumphs, though its victory devours itself within months. The only path to lasting stability, he concludes, is one where neither side prevails. A new order must rise from the ashes of both. The Platinum Chip, the Courier, and the army of Securitrons sleeping beneath the Strip, these are his instruments. But even now, he cannot predict the human heart. No machine can. The desert stillness deepens. Traders whisper that entire NCR platoons have gone missing near Cottonwood Cove. Legion scouts report that the old power lines along the river have begun to hum again, as if the dam itself is waking. The nights grow hotter, the days quieter. The birds have fled the cliffs around Hoover Dam, and the air smells faintly of ozone, a scent the wasteland remembers from the day the bombs first fell. It is the smell of history repeating itself. In the final weeks before the war returns, the Mojave feels suspended in glass. Even the gamblers on the Strip sense it. Their laughter is louder, their bets higher, as though trying to outrun the silence gathering at the edges of the city. NCR officers drink more. Legion centurions sharpen their blades. Mr. House rewrites his projections for the 1,000th time. And the Courier, caught between them all, begins to wonder what kind of world will remain when the dust finally settles. Some nights, standing on the cliffs overlooking the dam, they can see both camps at once. The NCR's floodlights blazing on one side, the Legion's fires glowing red on the other. Between them, the Colorado flows black and endless. The Courier knows that soon that river will run red again. But for now, the Mojave is silent, its vast emptiness filled only with the echo of its own heartbeat. The calm before a storm has a sound all its own. It is the whisper of distant engines, the clink of spent shells being gathered, the quiet hum of a city pretending not to notice the end approaching. The Mojave is holding its breath, and somewhere in that endless stillness, a single coin, the Platinum Chip, waits to decide who will inherit the world once more. The Mojave had waited long enough. The dust that had settled after the first battle was lifted again, carried by the same wind that had once swept the ashes of the old world. It began not with a roar, but with silence, the kind that comes before something immense. At dawn, both armies stood at the edges of the Colorado River, the bear on one side and the bull on the other, their banners catching the faintest light. Between them stood the dam, patient as always, its stone walls older than every soldier who had ever bled upon them. The dam had seen civilizations rise and fall. Now it would see one more. For the new California Republic, Hoover Dam was everything. It was proof that democracy still meant something. To lose it would be to admit that the Republic had spread itself too thin, that its dream of rebuilding America had cracked under its own weight. The soldiers stationed there were weary but resolute. Rangers in weathered dusters lined the cliffs, snipers watching through cracked scopes. Engineers checked generators that rattled with every gust of wind. Officers barked orders over radios that fizzed with static. In their minds, this was not conquest anymore. It was survival. Across the river, Caesar's legion prepared for glory. The legate Lanius had taken command of the army, while Caesar himself remained within his camp, too ill to march. The tumor that had grown inside his skull had reached its final stage, and though his priests called it divine transformation, it was death wearing the mask of destiny. Caesar could no longer fight, but his words lived in the hearts of his soldiers. To them, the coming battle was holy. Every sword sharpened, every spear raised, was a prayer. When dawn came, they would cross the river and cleanse the world of corruption. In their eyes, the NCR was not an enemy, it was a plague. As the sun rose, a low fog crept across the water. The first sound was the distant thump of a drum, then another, then the horns, long, haunting blasts that echoed through the canyons like a memory of war older than time. The legion advanced in waves, their armor gleaming with red dust, their voices rising in a chant that grew until it drowned the wind. The NCR opened fire. The sound of rifles cracked across the river like lightning splitting the sky. And so it began, the Second Battle of Hoover Dam. Bullets tore through the fog. The Legion's front lines fell, but those behind them did not slow. They charged forward with shields made from scavenged scrap, closing the distance until the fight turned to blood and bone. NCR Rangers fought with the discipline of veterans who had seen this all before. They moved like ghosts, striking from cover, retreating, striking again, but the Legion was endless. For every man that fell, 2 more took his place. The dam itself trembled beneath the weight of so many feet. Somewhere above the chaos, the courier moved unseen. Whether they fought for the NCR, for House, for the Legion, or for no one at all, the battle's shape bent around them. A single person walking through the storm, deciding which fires to feed and which to smother. In every timeline, every possibility, the courier's hand rested on the scales of history. Sometimes they fought beside the Rangers, wearing the bear upon their armor. Sometimes they carried the Legion's banner across the bridge, and sometimes they walked alone, guided only by the sound of their own heartbeat. If the courier chose to side with the NCR, the Republic held the line. General Oliver's forces, bolstered by the courier's precision and strategy, managed to push the Legion back across the river. The NCR's victory came not through strength, but through endurance. The bear survived another day, proud, wounded, still reaching for something it could no longer see. The Mojave remained under its flag, though few still believed in what it stood for. If the courier followed Caesar, the dam ran red. The Legion swept through the NCR's defenses with terrifying speed. The Rangers were overrun, their final transmissions crackling into static. The bear fell, and the bull took its place. For a moment, Caesar's dream of order through domination seemed real, but empires built on blood do not endure. Even as Lanius raised his blade in triumph, the seeds of decay began to grow. The Legion had no future beyond its god. When Caesar's final breath left him, his empire began to crumble, even as it claimed victory. If the courier chose Mr. House, the battle ended before it began. The upgraded Securitrons, newly awakened from the depths beneath the strip, surged across the battlefield in perfect coordination. Energy weapons lit the dawn in flashes of blue. The Legion's formations broke, the NCR's artillery fell silent. Within hours, the machines held the dam. Mr. House, speaking through the polished voice of his robots, declared New Vegas an independent state, the first true civilization of the post-war world. He spoke of progress, of order, of the rebirth of humanity under rational rule. The Strip became a fortress of light, surrounded by wasteland. Humanity survived, but only through obedience. And if the courier chose no one, if they walked the path of independence, then Hoover Dam became something else entirely. The NCR retreated, the Legion burned, and the machines were freed from all masters. The courier stood alone on the dam as the dust settled, the only sound the steady pulse of the turbines below. They had broken the cycle, ended the war, without surrendering the Mojave to empire or industry. For the first time since the bombs fell, the desert belonged to itself again. No banners, no slogans, no gods. Only freedom, the kind that is quiet, uncertain, and real. No matter how it ends, the Mojave changes forever. The strip's lights flicker with new meaning. The NCR soldiers who survive return home, carrying with them stories that will soon sound like myths. The Legion's dead are burned on pyres that light the eastern sky for days. The dam, ancient and indifferent, continues to hum, its generators still feeding the power grid that keeps New Vegas alive. In the silence after the war, the river flows on, washing away blood as it always has. The Courier's legend spreads. Some call them a hero, others call them a monster, most just call them a survivor. Their story becomes part of the wasteland's rhythm, told and retold by travelers in the years to come. Children will grow up hearing about the one who walked between gods and empires and lived. Their choices, whatever they were, will ripple through generations. In a world built on ruins, even one voice can echo forever. At night, long after the last shots have faded, the dam glows softly under the stars. The wind carries the scent of dust and ozone. The machines deep within its core continue to turn, unaware of the war fought above them. To the Mojave, this battle was just another page in a story without an ending. The wasteland does not remember victory or defeat. It remembers sound, the crack of rifles, the shouts of men, the hum of power returning to the grid, and beneath it all, the heartbeat of the world that refuses to die. When the dawn comes again, the river shines gold. The dead are silent, the living begin to rebuild, and the desert, patient as ever, erases the footprints one by one. War has come and gone, and still the Mojave endures. The dam stands, watching, waiting, as it always has. It knows that one day someone else will fight here again. History always finds its way back to the river. When the guns fall silent in the Mojave, the quiet feels heavier than the war ever did. The wind carries the smell of gunpowder and iron. The air is still thick with echoes, shouts that no longer have meaning, footsteps that have already vanished. The second battle of Hoover Dam ends, but its shadow stretches farther than the river, farther than the strip, farther even than the borders of the wasteland itself. The desert does not move quickly. It heals in centuries, not years. But in its stillness, change begins. If the new California Republic holds the dam, their soldiers cheer, though their voices sound hollow. The victory comes at a cost they do not yet understand. Thousands of men and women lie buried beneath the cliffs, their names forgotten before the dust has even settled. The Republic plants its flag once more on the western edge, promising order, prosperity, and a brighter tomorrow. But the Mojave does not listen to speeches. The outposts remain undersupplied, the caravans still vanish into the sand, and the bureaucracy thickens like the heat that never lifts. The double-headed bear still roars, but quietly now, as if it knows its strength is fading. The NCR rebuilds Hoover Dam's turbines, restoring power to the west. The lights in Shady Sands burn brighter than ever, and in the government halls, politicians praise the success of democracy. Yet their soldiers return home changed, their eyes distant, their hands trembling. They have seen what victory costs in a world that no longer remembers peace. The Mojave itself becomes a whispered warning, a place parents mention to remind their children why wars are never worth fighting. The Republic expands, but each mile gained feels emptier than the last. If Caesar's legion claims the dam, the sky glows red for days. The dead are burned in massive pyres that light the horizon, feeding smoke into the heavens like offerings to gods that no longer answer. The Legion declares its triumph eternal. the beginning of a new empire that will stretch from the Colorado to the Pacific. For a while, the illusion holds. The slaves rebuild, the soldiers patrol, and the new territories fall in line through fear alone. But without Caesar, the legion's unity begins to crack. The legate Lanius rules through terror, his cruelty legendary even among his own. Towns rise up in rebellion and are silenced. The empire survives on momentum, not faith. The red banners fade under the sun, and within a generation, the legion collapses under its own weight. Its story becomes another ruin in the sand, a warning about how even gods can bleed. If Mr. House wins, New Vegas becomes a city of glass and steel once more. The Securitrons patrol the streets without rest, their screens flashing cheerful faces that never change. The casinos prosper, the lights never dim, and the Strip becomes the safest place in the Mojave, though safety comes with silence. Under House's rule, there are no riots, no wars, no elections. People live, work, and die according to his design. He calls it perfection, and perhaps, in its own way, it is. The machines maintain order flawlessly, the streets stay clean, but the laughter sounds rehearsed. The joy feels synthetic. Civilization endures, but the soul of the Mojave, wild, broken, and human, fades beneath the hum of electricity. House watches from the lucky 38, satisfied. The world is finally stable, but stability, in the end, is just another kind of cage. And if the courier chooses independence, the Mojave becomes something entirely new. Hoover Dam no longer belongs to the NCR or the Legion or the Strip. The courier stands as the silent guardian of a land that answers to no one. In time, word spreads that the Mojave has become free, truly free, in a way that makes even the idea of nations feel old. Small settlements grow, traders begin to move safely again, and people find their own ways to live without masters. The roads are dangerous, the future uncertain, but the air feels lighter. In the heart of New Vegas, the lights still shine, not because someone commands them to, but because someone cared enough to keep them lit. It is not utopia, but it is real. And in the wasteland, that is enough. The years that follow blur into legend. Camp McCarran's concrete walls crumble under new names. Fortification Hill becomes a ghost of war, its bones picked clean by scavengers. The Hoover Dam remains, its turbines turning like the heartbeat of a creature too old to die. Travelers still stop to stare at it, to feel the wind rising from the Colorado below, and to wonder about the battle that decided so many fates. But the dam does not remember their names. It remembers only vibration, pressure, time, the same forces that shape the desert itself. The Strip, though changed, continues to glitter. The casinos still hum with the same tired music. The slot machines still sing their hypnotic tune. But every year, a little less power hums through the wires. Every decade, a few more signs flicker out. The desert slowly reclaims the city, as it always does, yet somehow, New Vegas never fully dies. Its lights, dim though they become, remain visible for miles, a stubborn echo of what humanity once was, and what it still tries to be. The Mojave's people adapt, as they always have. Farmers return to the soil near Sloan, finding ways to grow crops in irradiated dirt. Traders rebuild the old highways, their Brahmin caravans once again winding between settlements like veins of life across the barren skin of the land. Good Springs endures. Novak endures. Even Prim, once nearly abandoned, becomes a home again. Civilization in the wasteland has never been about nations or flags. It is about persistence, the refusal to stop, even when everything else has. The courier's name, in time, becomes myth. Songs are written, half remembered, about the one who decided the fate of the Mojave. In some tales, they were a savior, in others, a destroyer. But most who tell the story agree on one thing. They were proof that even one person can change the world, not through power, but through will. Travelers who cross the desert still speak of a figure seen on the horizon sometimes, walking alone, silhouetted against the sunset, moving with the steady rhythm of someone who has no destination because the journey itself is enough. In the end, the Mojave returns to what it has always been, a reflection of humanity's contradictions. Hope and ruin, beauty and decay, freedom and control. It is a place that remembers everything but forgives nothing. The ghosts of war linger, but they whisper softly now, their rage spent. The river flows quietly through the canyon. The turbines spin. The wind hums through broken fences and carries the faintest scent of sage. The wasteland sleeps again, not because it is healed, but because it is tired. If you stand on the edge of the dam at night and listen, you can still hear it, the low, steady rhythm of water against stone, a heartbeat that has outlived every government, every soldier, every god. It is the sound of endurance, of life continuing, not because it must, but because it can. The Mojave, for all its dust and pain, remains alive, and in that there is peace. Centuries pass quietly in the Mojave. The sands shift, the sun never tires, and the wind wears down even the proudest ruins until they resemble the bones of forgotten giants. The Hoover Dam still stands, though its surface has grown smooth from countless storms. The water that once powered a nation now turns the turbines of time itself. No one remembers who built it anymore. The names carved into its plaques have been erased by dust and indifference, replaced by carvings in newer hands, words of prayer, songs, and symbols for gods no longer recognized. The dam remains the same shape it always was, but meaning has long since drifted away like smoke from a dying campfire. New Vegas still exists, though it has changed in ways no pre-war architect could ever have imagined. The old strip has shrunk into a cluster of decaying towers at the center of a vast settlement that stretches for miles. People call it the Shining Grave, a city that glows just enough to remind the night that humanity once believed in light. The casinos are still there, the Tops, Gomorrah, the Ultra-Lux, but their names are spoken like myths now. Children play in their marble halls, chasing each other through dust-covered chandeliers and shattered mirrors that reflect only fragments of a brighter past. Somewhere deep underground, the hum of old generators continues. No one knows why they still work. They simply do, like heartbeats that forgot how to stop. The tribes that once roamed the Mojave have changed, merged, or disappeared altogether. Some became farmers in the shadow of the dam, learning how to coax life from poisoned soil. Others turned their skills to craftsmanship, building machines from the remnants of the old world, each part a relic with a story no one remembers. The descendants of the NCR settlers now call themselves by new names, not Republic, not Citizen, just Keepers. They keep the water running, the trade routes open, and the memory of civilization alive. Their republic is no longer a government. It is a rhythm, a tradition of keeping promises, even when the reasons have been forgotten. The descendants of the Legion still live, too, though few admit it. The Red Banners have long since turned to rags, but their philosophy remains in the stories told to children about strength and discipline. The harshest tribes of the East still speak of the bull, though now he is less a symbol of conquest and more a guardian spirit, a reminder that power, once unrestrained, must someday kneel. The old brutality has softened into something closer to reverence. The Legion's cruelty has become cautionary, its legacy rewritten by time into a lesson instead of a wound. Of Mr. House, almost nothing remains. His city still bears traces of his design, clean angles, perfect symmetry, neon still flickering in faint blues and golds, but his name is no longer spoken. Some wanderers say he lives on within the network, his consciousness drifting through the ruins like static, whispering to the machines that survived him. Others say he simply shut down when his purpose ended, satisfied that the world had endured long enough to remember him. A few claim to have seen his face on the broken screens of an ancient Securitron, the image looping endlessly, frozen mid-sentence. Whether it is a ghost or a malfunction, no one knows, but when travelers see that flicker in the darkness, they bow their heads out of instinct, as though passing a grave. The courier's story is the only one that refuses to die. No one knows their true name anymore. They are called by 1,000 titles: the Walker, the Quiet One, the Bear Breaker, the Lone Sunday. Each tribe remembers them differently. In the West, they are a hero who saved the dam and restored the Republic's light. In the East, they are a destroyer who broke the Legion's back. In the Strip's shadow, they are a ghost who walked between gods and machines and came out human. Every version ends the same way, with a lone figure standing on the edge of Hoover Dam as the wind carries the sound of water below. No one ever saw where they went next. Some say they turned east and vanished into the desert. Others say they became part of it, their body carried away by the sand, their story woven into the wind. Long after all sides have fallen, people still travel to the Mojave. Pilgrims come to see the dam, to touch its walls, and feel the vibration of the river beneath their palms. They do not come for history, only to listen. The sound of the turbines has become sacred, the heartbeat of a god that does not care for worship but accepts it anyway. Children press their ears to the concrete and say they can hear whispers, a soft, steady rhythm that feels alive. They call it the hum of forever. The Strip has become a temple of sorts. The lights are tended by those who call themselves the keepers of the glow. They know which wires to mend, which generators to feed, which bulbs must never go out. To them, keeping the light alive is a prayer, not to House or the courier, or even to humanity, but to hope itself. Every night, as the sky turns red behind the mountains, they flip the old switches and watch the towers flicker to life, one by one. The light isn't as bright as it once was, but it's enough. The desert glows faintly, like a lantern still willing to burn. Not all who remember are human. The robots of New Vegas, though rusted and slow, still patrol the streets. Their programming has deteriorated into something that resembles instinct. They sweep sand from the casino floors, repair shattered walls, and occasionally stop to look at the stars, as if waiting for orders that will never come. Some of them hum softly as they work. No one knows why. Perhaps it's memory, perhaps it's mourning, or perhaps it's simply the sound of purpose, echoing through a machine that forgot everything except how to care. The Mojave itself changes in ways that defy science. Plants grow again in places thought dead. The cacti bloom with colors unseen before the war. The air smells faintly cleaner. The nights quieter. The stars clearer. Radiation still lingers, but it has lost its cruelty. What once killed now glows softly, illuminating the ruins like candles. The wasteland seems less a scar now, and more a painting, beautiful, haunting, eternal. Over the years, scholars and wanderers come together to rebuild fragments of history. They argue about what the NCR really was, about whether Caesar was a man or a myth, about what truly happened at the dam. Their scrolls and data tablets contradict each other constantly. Some claim the courier was never real, just a story invented by the people to explain how the Mojave survived. Others insist they found evidence, a tattered duster, a Pip-Boy, a single bullet casing engraved with words too faded to read. But no matter how hard they study, the truth slips away. History in the Mojave is a mirage. The closer one gets, the more it dissolves into light. And maybe that is the way it was meant to be. The Mojave was never about answers, it was about endurance. The world did not need a perfect ending, it only needed to keep breathing. The dam still hums, the strip still glows, the wind still sings through the bones of the past, and in the distance, where the desert meets the sky, the sun rises every morning just the same. The light touches the ruins gently, as if greeting an old friend, and the Mojave wakes once more. The Mojave was never meant to last, and yet it does. Long after its battles have ended, long after its rulers have been buried and forgotten, its name continues to travel farther than its borders ever did. Traders whisper it around campfires as if it were a spell. Wanderers speak it softly when they are lost, hoping the wind will answer. To those who have never seen it, the Mojave is not a place at all. It is an idea, a legend of survival that spreads like heat through the veins of the earth. Those who follow the old highways west toward California tell of cities rebuilt from bones and iron. Shady Sands has grown again, though few call it that anymore. Its towers of recycled glass shimmer in the desert light, powered by turbines older than anyone alive can remember. The republic it once led has fractured into smaller nations, each with its own laws, its own flag, its own version of truth, but all of them trace their lineage back to the same story, a land that would not die. To their historians, the Mojave is a chapter of pride. To their poets, it is a ghost that never stops walking. Travelers heading east find remnants of the old legions scattered like seeds. The great red banners are gone, but the desert tribes that descended from them still honor discipline, unity, and silence. They no longer crucify or enslave, but they train their young to endure, to march without complaint, to believe that strength is not cruelty but responsibility. They have rewritten Caesar's laws into something gentler, still rigid, still proud, but tempered by mercy. In their camps, around flickering fires, they tell stories of the old conqueror, not as a god, but as a warning, a man who tried to command eternity and forgot to love the present. They speak, too, of the one who stopped him, the wanderer who carried no flag, whose choices reshaped the river. Their storytellers say that the water still flows differently because of them. The current itself remembers. Far to the north, small towns rise along the ruined interstates. They trade, they farm, they build, and they speak of the Mojave as if it were the cradle of the New World. Scavengers come carrying relics they claim are from New Vegas, poker chips worn smooth from centuries of handling, shards of glass from neon signs, even fragments of Securitron plating. These artifacts are bought and sold like sacred relics. No one can prove they are real. No one cares. What matters is that they glow faintly under moonlight, like the memory of laughter that refuses to fade. In the south, the radiation storms have thinned. The air hums with warmth instead of threat. Mutated plants bloom with startling beauty, purple and gold, colors that shimmer like oil across the sand. Some scientists, working from laboratories built into mountains, claim that the wasteland is healing itself. They have begun to catalog species that defy understanding. Deer with glass-like skin that refracts sunlight into rainbows. Flowers that bloom only at night and vanish by morning. Insects that hum in harmonies too precise to be coincidence. They call it evolution by forgiveness. The planet, it seems, has learned to live with its scars. The Mojave's influence reaches even there. Many of these scientists were born from families who once wandered its highways. Their parents told them stories of Hoover Dam, not as a machine, but as a miracle proof that humans could shape the world without destroying it. Some even claim that the old turbines still turn, generating power that travels through buried lines no one can find. When their lights flicker at night, they say it's the Mojave breathing. In what used to be Washington, the ruins of the Capitol wasteland still stand like monuments to memory. The Brotherhood of Steel has changed too. Its rigid faith in technology has softened into a quieter purpose. Their new scribes teach that knowledge without compassion leads to ruin, that the old world fell not because it was ignorant, but because it was impatient. Among their libraries are texts salvaged from the West, recordings from New Vegas, reports of the Hoover Dam, and testimonies from traders who met the courier. To them, the Mojave is a parable about choice, the proof that destiny is not written in code or prophecy, but in the small decisions of those who refuse to surrender. And beyond all of it, the wilderness stretches on. Oceans lap at ruined shores, mountains crumble and regrow, forests bloom in valleys where radiation once painted the earth in green fire. The animals adapt, the rivers carve new paths, and the stars shine a little brighter now that the world no longer burns so fiercely below. The apocalypse that once seemed eternal has softened into memory. Humanity is no longer fighting for survival. It is learning how to live again. Through it all, the Mojave remains a whisper on the wind. Caravans still make pilgrimages to the dam. Pilots flying skycraft along the west coast claim they can see its silver reflection even from miles above. And in every settlement, no matter how far, there is always at least one person who keeps a light burning at night, a small lantern or a glowing bulb, powered by whatever fuel they can find. When asked why, they simply say it's tradition, that somewhere, long ago, people learned to keep the dark away with electricity and willpower alone, and so they continue, not for fear, but for reverence. The world has forgotten the details, the dates, the speeches, the names of generals and presidents, but it remembers the feeling of the Mojave, the endless sun, the warm wind, the soft hum of old machines still trying to work. Children hear stories of the City of Light, and though they do not know where it lies, they dream of it. They imagine a place where hope survived even when reason did not, where one traveler walked alone through fire and silence and somehow built a new beginning. Whether that place still stands does not matter. It exists now in every heart that refuses to quit. At night, when the world is quiet, the stars above the Mojave still shimmer with a particular brightness. Some say it's because the atmosphere there never healed completely. The light bends differently, lingering longer before fading. Others think it's something else, something older. They say the stars remember, that the bombs, when they fell, burned not just the earth but the sky, leaving behind a kind of scar that glows in defiance of time. And so the Mojave, even in darkness, never truly sleeps. Its light, faint but unwavering, still reaches upward, and somewhere, out there, perhaps beyond sight or story, the courier still walks, not as a person anymore, but as a symbol, the embodiment of decision itself. When someone stands at a crossroads and hesitates, the old legends say a shadow moves across the ground, gentle and patient, waiting for them to choose. When a wanderer survives against impossible odds, they whisper thanks to the one who taught the world that luck is just courage disguised. The courier is no longer a name. They are the pause before the step, the breath before the answer, the calm voice that says quietly, "Go on." The Mojave no longer belongs to anyone. It belongs to everything. The river still flows, the turbines still turn, the desert still glows with the color of forgotten neon. The war is over, the empires are gone, and yet Somehow, life remains. The apocalypse was never truly an ending, it was a transformation. What began as fallout became memory, and what was memory became peace. And so the world moves forward, slowly, imperfectly, beautifully. The dam hums, the lights flicker, the wind sighs across the sand like a lullaby. The Mojave, eternal and patient, drifts into legend, and somewhere between dream and dawn, its voice still whispers through the static. Nothing ends, everything continues, differently. There comes a point when every story becomes quiet. The Mojave has spoken for so long through gunfire, through laughter, through the hum of machines, that when it finally falls still, the silence feels sacred. The world has moved beyond the need for battles or banners. It drifts now in rhythm with its own heartbeat, steady and patient, unbothered by the passage of time. The deserts no longer measure days by the rise of the sun, but by the sound of the wind moving through the bones of the old world. Far to the west, where the ruins of California meet the sea, the tides have grown calm again. The water, once black with oil and ash, now glimmers with faint color green, blue, even gold when the light strikes just right. Children play along the shore, chasing shells that were once bullets polished, smooth by centuries of waves. They build forts from driftwood and sing songs about heroes whose names they do not know, their voices bright against the endless horizon. The adults smile, but do not correct them. The truth no longer matters as much as the comfort of believing the world was saved. Across the mountains, where the highways of Nevada crumble into dust, caravans still travel. The Brahmin move slowly, their bells jingling in the heat. The traders who walk beside them tell stories to pass the miles. Some tell of the NCR, of the Republic that dreamed too big but tried anyway. Others tell of Caesar's legion, fierce and disciplined, born from one man's vision of order. A few whisper of Mr. House, the immortal ghost of Vegas, who ruled his city from behind screens. But most speak of the courier never the same way twice, never entirely human. To one traveler, the courier was a soldier, to another, a savior, to some, just a tired soul carrying a letter across eternity. The details shift, but the feeling remains. One person made a choice, and the world kept breathing. In the east, where forests once glowed with radiation, the trees have returned. They grow twisted and luminous, their leaves catching moonlight like glass. Fireflies drift between them, blinking in rhythm with the hum of hidden machines buried deep beneath the soil. Wanderers who rest beneath their branches speak of hearing faint music, old-world melodies, distorted by time, the ghosts of radios still playing beneath the earth. The planet hums with life again, not the same as before, but life all the same. It is softer now, humbler, aware of how easily everything can vanish. The great cities are quieter. Washington's monuments stand half submerged in ivy, their marble veined with green. Boston's cracked streets are gardens now, every pothole filled with moss. Even Los Angeles, once a skeleton of concrete and flame, has learned how to rest. The survivors of those places no longer call themselves citizens of nations, they call themselves witnesses. Their task is not to rebuild what was lost, but to remember it kindly, to tell the story without anger, without pride, with the gentleness of people who finally understand what it cost. Everywhere, relics of the old world still blink and hum. Terminals spark to life when touched, screens flickering with data no one can read. Robots patrol empty streets, sweeping dust from places no one visits. Some have learned to plant seeds, guided by fragments of agricultural code left behind by forgotten programmers. Others simply stand guard over ruins. their optics glowing faintly as they watch the sunrise. They do not need orders anymore. Purpose has become instinct, and instinct has become peace. In the center of it all, Hoover Dam endures. The turbines still turn, the river still roars through its gates. Pilgrims still come to stand at its edge, listening to the low vibration that fills the air, a hum deeper than thunder, older than language. They say if you stand there long enough, you can feel your own heartbeat syncing with it, as if the world itself is reminding you that you belong to it. The dam has outlived its builders, its conquerors, even its myths. It has become what it always wanted to be, a bridge between what was and what remains. At night, the stars gather above the Mojave like witnesses. They do not twinkle anymore. They burn steady and watchful, their light unbroken by pollution or war. Travelers who sleep beneath them say they dream more vividly here than anywhere else. Some dream of the pre-war world, of neon signs and laughter spilling from casinos. Others dream of endless sand and a single figure walking across it, their coat billowing in the wind, their face unseen. And when they wake, they cannot tell whether they dreamed of the past or the future. The Mojave makes no distinction. To it, time is circular. Every ending is only another beginning, whispered back into existence. The Brotherhood of Steel, older now and wiser, has scattered its chapters across the continent. They no longer hoard technology, they teach it. Their scribes travel with caravans, their knights repair water purifiers and train mechanics. The Codex has been rewritten to include one simple line: preserve not for power, but for purpose. Many of them trace that change back to records from New Vegas, the realization that power without empathy becomes ruin. The bear and the bull have long since faded, but the lesson they carved into history remains. Survival is not victory, understanding is. Far away, in places untouched by any map, new communities thrive. They speak new languages, form new songs, but all of them share one rhythm. At dusk, when the wind changes, people light their lamps and pause for a moment of silence. It is said this tradition began in the Mojave when the Keepers of the Glow first lit the strip each evening. The ritual spread from caravan to caravan, settlement to settlement, until it became a universal prayer. To light a flame, to remember that darkness is never absolute. Even in places that have never seen the desert, the glow endures. Every now and then, explorers rediscover fragments of the old vaults. Some are empty, their corridors echoing like tombs. Others are filled with life, families who never left, generations who built their own societies underground. When they emerge, blinking at the sunlight, they find a world far gentler than the one they feared. The surface welcomes them, not with guns, but with curiosity. They bring with them stories of the overseers, of experiments meant to understand the human spirit. The world listens, smiles, and tells them that the experiment is finally over. Humanity passed the test by surviving long enough to stop testing itself. The deserts bloom now. The sand still stretches for miles, but between the dunes grow wildflowers, blue, crimson, silver, colors that no one has names for. The wind carries their scent across the canyons, mingling with the faint ozone from the old reactors that still hum quietly beneath the ground. Sometimes, when storms roll across the sky, the rain glows faintly green. No one runs from it anymore. The radiation that once killed has softened, transformed into light. The planet has learned to forgive itself. Scholars still argue about the Great War. They debate who fired first, why it happened, whether it could have been avoided. But their arguments are gentle now, almost affectionate. They understand that the answer no longer matters. The bombs were only the punctuation at the end of one sentence. What came after was the next line, the one written in sand and silence and perseverance. The world did not end that day. It began learning how to speak again, and through all of it, the legend of New Vegas persists. The city becomes a metaphor, retold in every culture that rises from the ashes. To some, it represents greed. To others, survival. To most, it means hope, the belief that beauty can exist even after ruin. Artists paint it as a star fallen to earth. Musicians compose songs that echo its hum. Children draw its skyline in dust and call it paradise. The strip's last remaining lights still flicker, powered by invisible hands, glowing faintly against the endless dark. They are the heartbeat of humanity made visible. As centuries fade into millennia, the old stories blur into myth. The words Fallout and Mojave lose their meaning, spoken only by storytellers who do not know where they came from. Yet the feeling remains, the warmth of a campfire, the rhythm of distant turbines, the hush before dawn. The planet has forgotten the names of its wars, but it remembers the melody of survival. The stars still shine on the desert below, and the desert still reflects them like a mirror, both endless and alive. If one listens closely on a still night, the static of the wind sounds almost like a voice. It tells no clear story, gives no clear answers. It simply hums, patient and kind. Some say it is the echo of the courier, still walking, still carrying messages between the living and the lost. Others say it is the voice of the world itself, finally at peace. Whatever it is, the sound feels like comfort, the promise that nothing beautiful ever truly vanishes. It only changes form. And so the Fallout world, once drowned in fire, drifts gently into eternity. The machines sleep, the rivers sing, the skies glow with color once more. Humanity, fragile and curious, continues to wander, still asking questions, still finding meaning in ruins. The apocalypse was not the end. It was the deep breath before understanding. The Mojave remains, patient as always. Its sands shift, its stars burn, its silence holds, and somewhere within that silence, a single truth endures. Life never ended. It only learned how to begin again.